the district and the parents and the cities.
Absolutely, and one of the things that I would recommend to parents is both the city of Sunnyvale and the city of Cupertino have active Safe Routes committees, and they are always looking for parent engagement and parents to be part of those meetings. And so one of the best ways to have a voice is to be a participant in those meetings where a lot of work is done to improve the routes for kids in those areas. It's not a meeting that is well attended by parents. We've got a couple parents from a couple different schools. My goal would be to have a person from each school. Montclair's done a great job. They have a Safe Routes liaison who works to share the concerns and voice the concerns in various forums. And so what the city of Cupertino is looking for, and the city of Sunnyvale, is they would like one parent rep from each of their schools at the minimum to be able to engage in that dialogue. Those are meetings that I attend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie, and I'm looking at my board members to see that it seems a lot is going on, and Leslie has been keeping us in tune with what's happening. I would say, she'd come back in a month or 6 weeks or 2 months as things develop and keep us posted, so the board is aware of what has happened from today going forward, because it seems like, Cupertino, there's things happening, so I just want to see what the board members, that direction seems to resonate with everybody.
Yeah, is this a time to talk about whether or not the district is interested in funding crossing guards, or is that the next item, or is that not a discussion for tonight?
That's not a discussion for tonight. This was only information item, actually, just so that we could get familiar with what's happening across the board, and then to keep in touch with, because we have learned what the costs are. I think we'll have to have a discussion item in a future meeting to talk about the funding as a district-wide thing. And the next item is more focused towards Los Altos.
Okay, great. So I just want to say thank you, Leslie. I'm sure you know more about traffic than you ever thought you would learn as a teacher and principal, but appreciate all your effort and your information. Thank you.
Thanks. So, moving on to 9.3.
We have one speaker, Stephanie Singer.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Singer. I have not only been a student through Cupertino schools myself, married to a student who went through Cupertino schools. Now we have 2 children going through Cupertino schools. Surprise. I really want to address what I didn't hear from Leslie tonight. She's done a lot. She's reached out. I have brought up issues. Many of my colleagues, other parents, former parents, incoming parents with fears, incoming potential parents that have left the district in fear of crossing Foothill Expressway to get to the middle school. And what I am not hearing is I'm not hearing Valley Transportation Authority, and I'm not hearing Caltrans, and I'm not hearing County of Santa Clara. Our neighborhoods are landlocked by a county road. They cross a California state freeway. They cross a creek bed. We cannot leave our neighborhood without crossing these places. No coordination between 3 cities in front of Trader Joe's is going to get our children to school safely. In the 70s, when I started attending Cupertino schools, there was a school called Grant School. It was below Foothill, the area that is now, as when it was closed, being serviced by a bus, because the Cupertino district at that time had more schools than they had students. It's not a new subject, apparently. These things repeat themselves. When they closed that school, they realized that they were forcing children to cross Foothill Expressway in order to get to the next closest elementary school, and thus promised to provide, and have fulfilled that promise, to get children across safely via bus. What doesn't work is when those children leave their 6 years of matriculation in elementary school and are expected to get back across that same expressway. My 6th grade child, 67 pounds, is expected to cross Foothill Expressway, crossing a creek bed, going down Homestead, crossing the on-ramp and on-ramps to Highway 85 during commute traffic. All while the start time, passing West Valley Elementary School traffic, all while West Valley start time and Cupertino Middle start time are both 8 a.m. And for those of us who have subsequent customers, younger children, going to Montclair, we are then expected to be able to turn right back around and sit in that traffic and safely get our children back to Montclair by 8:30. It's unrealistic. It's not safe. How is my 67-pound fifth grader promised safe transit across based on which side of the expressway he lives in? But the moment that 67-pound wrestler from Cupertino Middle School is no longer provided any safety or security by this district.
Thank you. So 9.2 is now open for discussion, or 9.3, I'm sorry, and I know someone had comments on that. Before you do comments, I just want to correct a little typo on it. It's a discussion item, it's not an approval item. The message says approval of agreement, but it's in the discussion.
Correct. So the board had asked for us to bring the contract to the meeting, or the agreement to the meeting, as an information discussion item, and then determine what would be the next steps following this meeting.
Okay, someone.
Okay, so this is just a clarification, but on the contract with the city of Los Altos, it looked like it was a 5-year contract. I forget what, through 2020? Okay, so 3 years.
Yeah, although it does
4
say,
years.
correct, the agreement may be terminated by either party upon 30 days written notification
Okay,
to the other party.
Okay.
So there is an opportunity to opt out.
but the offer from the MPTO was basically through next year, only through 2017.
It's for the remainder of this school
Yeah,
year. So if
so-
crossing guards were placed this year and they cost, let's say, $4,000, MPTO would pick up that cost until the end of the school year.
Right,
At which time, we would then need to, and they would be giving the district the money to be, like they do to St. Simon's, and then the following year, we would need to fully fund, or, I'm sorry, not fully fund, do our portion of the agreement.
unless they were to renew their commitment every
Unless
year.
they were to renew their commitment on an annual basis.
Okay.
And that process at school sites, as you probably recall, happens in sometime during the spring.
So they can't make a 4-year commitment.
The email and the statement today in the meeting was that they made the decision at their last board meeting to enter into the agreement or support with the funding until the end of the school year.
Thanks.
Other questions? Phyllis?
I just have a comment about the agreement for MPTO to pick up the cost. I have some serious reservations about that because, as I mentioned at the last meeting, I have been to a number of intersections in our district. I've been to several more since our last meeting looking at traffic. There are serious crossings in lots of areas of our district where students are not probably as safe as they should be crossing. But I think if we start to allow PTAs and PTOs and parent organizations to pick up the cost of those, we're getting into an equity issue because we have parts of our district that are equally dangerous where those parent organizations don't have the ability to raise the money. And I think it's not fair. So I do have some reservations about approving an agreement where a PTA would pick up the cost.
Any other comments, discussion items?
I have a question. So just a follow-up question with the bus route. So how, do you know how long is the distance for the bus?
How long is the distance for the bus? You mean
The bus route? Like for the 11 stops,
Right.
how long, like,
Like how long are they on the bus?
no, it's like,
How
is
far-
it
how
1
many
mile
miles?
or 2 miles or?
That I am not sure. All I know is that there are 11 stops on that east side, and then they bring them over the Foothill Expressway and drop them off that month there. What I can tell you in regards to busing from the opposite side, if you were to take the west side of the campus, because then when we talk about getting students from the west side to Cupertino Middle School, there are approximately 196 students that are on the west side of Foothill Expressway. Approximately 100 students, separate from this 196 kindergarten through 5th graders. There are also approximately 100 students on the west side that go to Cupertino Middle School as their middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. But the distance, I don't have that information. We can try to find it and collect it and then let you know.
Okay, and the other following question is that self-serve program, or how much the cost for this bus service?
Yes. So the parents pay for busing. Do you know what the full cost is for a parent?
I think the full round trip annual bus pass is in the range of about $590. That's the full price, and then we offer a reduced price, or in some cases a free pass, depending upon the student's income eligibility.
So how much the district fund for this program?
It's fully
Is
funded.
fully funded?
Is it fully funded?
Well, can I ask a question? So when you're asking fully funded, we receive a limited amount of funding from the state. Obviously, it doesn't cover the costs of all the expenses. I'll share that in my presentation. Even when you take into account what we charge for bus pass, it doesn't fully cover what our true cost of running a transportation program.
And do you know how much is the extra cost?
When you look at, actually, in my presentation, I share with you what the encroachment is on transportation.
Okay.
So let me give you that number.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Okay, so for transportation, the encroachment on the general fund is to the tune of $2.1 million.
District-wide?
This is district-wide.
That's all transportation. What would it be for this?
I'm
particular
sorry,
one?
we cannot ask questions from the audience, but you're welcome to talk to Chris after the meeting and get your questions answered. Thank you.
And how much is allocated to
I don't have it broken down by school. This is just of the district.
Okay.
So I can come back and see if
Okay.
we can cost it out by site.
Thank you.
Other questions, Leanne?
I have a comment. So I am learning that there is equal distribution and equitable distribution. We want to be equitable. That I learned because students who are socioeconomically not able to afford something, we would provide them more support. I think this applies to crossing guards. Different cities, they have different policies. We can change that, just like we cannot change the parent of a student, but we still have to educate them. So if we are not allowing PTO to fund the crossing guard and we are not funding the crossing guard, these students in Montclair, they are getting 0 crossing guard. Is that equitable with other students who are in other schools? I don't think that's an equitable way of providing safety for our students. And different PTO, they have different priorities. They can choose to spend on crossing guard, they can choose to spend on other resources. It is Montclair parent Montclair PTO, they decide this year they are funding this crossing guard, and they are not they don't need to fully fund it like in other cities. All they are funding is the administrative fee, I think. That's 2,000. For example, in Cupertino, they will be asking the 2 extra when they are asking that will be asking us to fund the 2 full crossing guard. Then that's a very different story. And since these cities have been funding crossing guard fully in all other locations, we can make the case that this is just different. So I think it's important to provide equitable treatment to all the schools and all the cities, keeping in mind the differences of the cities. And safety is very important, because every day we are not providing guard is a day something might happen. In case something happens, whether it's on the city street or on the school ground, what will be the consequences to the district, to the parents, to what will we be able to sleep at night? That's just what I think.
Thank you. I have just a few comments on the reading the agreement. As Sona pointed out, it seems to go to 2020, and what I recall from the last meeting was we were trying to see how we could find a short-term solution until we can figure out our budgetary constraints, because that's coming up. And so I would want to see if we are going to, because right now it's a discussion item and we need to have some more information, because I'm not sure if our lawyers have even looked at liability, because I know some of the speakers in the past have said that we would not have any liability, but as I read this agreement, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like we still have liability, but I'm not a lawyer, so I need to see that our attorneys have reviewed this and given us direction as to whether or not the district has liability after we sign this agreement. And thirdly is, if we're going to do this for a short term, we need to change the dates. I do not feel comfortable saying that it could be, we can cancel the agreement with a 30-day notice. I'd rather have the agreement that only goes to June 30th, 2017, rather than 2020. And I think we have to kind of give the next set of direction to staff at this point, so would ask my fellow board members to see how they would like to proceed on that. Kristen?
I totally agree with you, and I think when we are looking for the short-term solution, and PDO actually put a really sincere effort on this thing, so I will agree with you, like if we can find out something for short term, then probably we can just implement in the short term.
So are you guys suggesting we bring that back to vote?
I'm suggesting that we bring it back. I think we may have to do it for information again, because as board policy we have is that we don't vote the night we get information, and we are still not, we know the dates don't match. And the second question is about liability, is do we still have have our attorneys read this to make sure that it is?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, I think the second to the last slide is potential risk and liabilities. And the attorneys did look at the agreement. They looked at the sample agreement that Los Altos, one of the schools in Los Altos, signed with Los Altos City, or the school district with the city. The contract is identical with the exception of names and dates. And so they did have some 5 bullet points to think about in regards to risks and liabilities that were given to Chris and provided just verbatim from them.
Can you just read them out for us?
Yeah, so they say that these are potential liability exposures. Crossing guards that do not show up or show up late for assigned duties and an accident involving a student occurs in their absence, that's a potential liability. Auto versus Auto versus auto accident found to be caused by direction or lack of direction of the crossing guard is a potential liability. Auto versus child accident found to be caused by direction or lack of direction of the crossing guard attendant. Lack of professional training of the crossing guard, and then inappropriate interactions by district employee / volunteer with students. And so those were the liabilities. The last one is confusing to me, Chris. Inappropriate interactions by district employee, volunteer with student. I think they meant by the crossing guard that is hired and student. So those would be potential liabilities. If those things happen, there is the potential that someone could claim that the school, the district, the city were responsible because of the joint agreement.
So do we have liability to cover those potentials?
Yes, we do.
So again, the question comes back to my fellow board members is what do we want to give direction to staff is Phyllis?
I think a lot of this comes down to the fundamental question of whether or not we believe that as a district we have a responsibility to provide safety for children on the city streets. And I fully agree with what Kai said. I believe that we do not. I believe that's a city responsibility, and I think that if we start making agreements, whether it's PTO or us or whomever, about providing crossing guards, it's a slippery slope in a time when we have serious budget cuts that have to be made. So even though I know the discussion is not necessarily about whether the district's going to pay for the crossing guards, I think that the question is, do we believe it's our responsibility or not? And I think that should be part of the discussion. If we're not prepared to discuss it tonight, I think it should be part of the discussion next week or next meeting before, or at least before we vote on this agreement.
And I want to say something too, and I agree with Leanne's sentiments about safety and what's equitable, but also with what Phyllis and Kai are saying about our responsibility. And as you know, like when we had this rule that if the schools exceed a certain number of students, that we would put an AP at those schools, and we did that a couple years ago. But then when those schools declined in enrollment below 700, we took away those APs. It was very, very difficult to take away an AP from a school that had a 1-year AP and got used to it. So I was like really, and this has been a really, like, this vote has really been on my mind, or this concept, but we just have to be careful, I think, of short-term things, because when you give something to a community, it's very hard to take away. And I'm not saying I've decided either way, but it's not easy to just put in a short-term thing, because we've done that and we've seen how hard it was to take away.
So another,
I
Leanne?
have a question. So in terms of the liability, if the Los Altos, does the Los Altos contract out the crossing guards? Does the company who hire crossing guards provide liability coverage for when crossing guards not showing up or lack of professional training? Is that covered by the company who is providing crossing guard?
Do you know the answer to that?
I do not know the answer to that.
Can we ask?
Cedric, do you know the
Unfortunately, I
answer
don't
to
know the
that?
answer to that either. The police department handles the contract, I'm sorry.
Okay, so and that's the fundamental question, because it seems like we have been told that the liability is the districts and not the people who are hiring.
I think the liability first goes to the city, is that right? And then we are the secondary liability.
So can
you clarify that?
Can I make a recommendation? Basically, we just have to have these questions answered and brought back to the next meeting, or when you are able to get them. And I think at that point, we can have that fundamental discussion about, I totally agree with everything that has been said here, because it is very challenging to take away anything, but at the same time, it's very challenging, our uttermost thing is to have the students' safety. But where does the responsibility lie is a very, very difficult question to answer.
I have one more question. can, so if we deny the request for crossing guard and if some accidents happen, what's our liability if the parents sue the district because we refuse to provide these crossing guards? So I would like to understand what's our liability on
I
that.
think that's a question that can be, we can bring,
it back.
yeah.
We can bring that back.
So,
And another question is, I guess, in terms of process. So this thing has been on the agenda. I think the parents have been asking this for years. It's not just now. And this thing has been discussed, and every time we come up with new question. Liability was discussed in the last board meeting, and now we are asking new questions. So the next time it comes to the board, we are generating new question. When would this ever become an action item where we vote on?
so this is,
Why can't we just make this an action item for the next board meeting? And then we can bring information about liability, since the information about liability was already in the last board meeting.
well, Leanne, just to correct you there,
Sorry.
this is the first time we saw this contract. We had not seen this contract in the last
I
meeting.
understand, so
So-
next time it should be on an action item, shouldn't it be?
Well, we, as a board, and we can discuss this at another setting, this is not part of the discussion today, is have a setup that we do not like to vote on things at the night of the presentation of information.
So
Because,
we don't vote today, right? So
No.
can I now make a motion to put this contract as an action item for the next board meeting?
but it's going to have new information, and anytime an item has new information, we do not vote, and we can have a discussion about how, if that process doesn't seem right, the board as a whole can decide when we have our January board retreat meeting to go over processes that have been set up so far.
I don't consider information liability as new information, because that's an information that was presented last meeting.
Yeah, so I think Anjali and Kristen both stated this, but one thing I think we'd like to see is if Los Altos would allow that contract to go
Right.
through 2017, is that
Make it a
right?
short-term
Kristen
contract.
and Anjali, so that would be something concrete thing we could look at next time, that we've never looked at before.
So can we first vote? If you don't agree it should be an action item, let's vote, and you can vote it down. But I would like to make that motion. Would
This is-
anyone second?
This is not an action item right now. It is a discussion item. So we have to give direction to the staff as to what we would like them to bring next time. So the direction has been the points you have taken down, and can you just repeat as to what those points have
So
been?
we're going to clarify our liability, the city's liability, what happens if we don't cover what the liability involved in that is, what the agency's liability and responsibility is, and then we will also talk with the city about changing the date on the contract and what leeway we have in doing that, and can we make it a contract that starts in, let's say, January, February, depending on when the board moves forward, till the end of the school year as that short-term agreement.
I have a question. So just, I understand Leon's concerns, so, I don't know if it's possible, like, when the information ready, we have a special meeting first to get that information and make sure, like, we understand it, and then the next board meeting, we can vote.
Our next meeting, because the holiday's coming up, is on January 10th. So I think, and I don't know if they'll have all the information by then. So it is within the 3 weeks, and then the following board meeting is 2 weeks from there, right? So if I remember the dates correctly. So I think what you're requesting would take place anyway. So we don't have to make a motion to have a special
Right,
meeting.
I just wonder if that can be the case.
Yeah, but because of the way the calendar is set up, I don't see a need, but we can always see if we needed to do that.
Just so, I wanna, get to Laning's question about the agendizing. So you could call some special or emergency meeting, you have that right. If it's an emergency, we could do it quickly. Special meeting, you know, we still have to have the public notice 72 hours. This would probably not be deemed emergencies, we'd have to go with the 72 hours. The agendized piece of what Liang's asking for, I think it can be noted because the protocol that we have, so that the board handbook that you have says if a board member wants an item agendized, or if you want to address that particular item, that actually happens with the board president and vice president. So any board member can request any item or a specification around an item. It goes to the board president, vice president, and it's done during agenda planning. So oftentimes how it works is staff, for example, may put an item on as discussion, and when we do agenda planning, we're told to change it to the opposite, from action to discussion or discussion to action. If a board member says, can we put this on the next agenda, it is discussed in the planning process, and then it may not be that meeting, it could be the next meeting, depending on what is on a particular agenda or how much time it's going to take staff to collect it. So I would say your request is now noted because you're asking for it to be an action item. So that would go to agenda planning is how we would normally handle that.
So I'll try to understand what Kristen is proposing. So you are proposing maybe we can do a special meeting where we discuss the liability as an information item, and then right after the special meeting, we have the regular board meeting as an action item on the same day, but then we can announce both meetings at the same time, so this can be resolved in one day.
So,
Is that
no.
you're proposing?
No. So what's what I propose is like, if I remember correctly, we have a board advance on 6th.
Yes.
And then maybe we can have information ready by then. So,
Well, that we could, but remember that meeting has an agenda that's
Right.
preset. So I think we would have to backtrack that one because it was for a specific purpose.
right.
Not that you couldn't, but you could. I'm looking at staff. I try to get it. I'm not going to make them answer now about the speed of time and getting the information. But we have to remember we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're out. Most of us are gone in the district office. We do go on vacation. When we return, we don't return on that Monday. We return Tuesday, which is I believe the third. And then the meeting's 1 week later. That other meeting you're talking about is that Friday. But I think if we were going to carve out time on that meeting day, which I'm not saying we can't, but I do think we should check with our facilitator about how much time was needed for the work that we were doing, and then determine if we want to add it there.
And also we need a response from the city, so if we're gonna look at the contract, I don't know, but if I agree, the Montclair community has waited patiently a long time for this, so, but if there are 2 meetings in January, if we do the proposed route of the first time in January, look at it and then vote at the second meeting, we would hopefully have closure in January.
Any other questions, or can we move on? Okay, thank you, Leslie.